So the next one comes from Danielle Carretta, and I think you're a guy, so I apologise if you're not, but it's just we spell in the UK, we spell Danielle, that's the spelling for a sort of female, and I don't think it is on the continent, so I apologise. And it says, hello, does anyone know the correct sequence to connect a Furman and a UPS? Power Furman UPS or power UPS Furman? Because I know that you can connect the UPS to the Furman, it may cause the fact that the batteries work more than requested. On the other side, APC suggests connecting their UPS directly to the power instead of another device, in this case the Furman. That being said, I'm a bit confused. Any suggestions? Thank you. Right, this is quite important. So it's in response to a video I did about sort of studio setup and power surge protection in March 2017, so about 2 years ago this one was. In fact, it is 2 years ago if you think about it. And I've written a very long reply to this particular person because it's not simple, but it is simple. And the simple answer is you don't need the Furman if you've got a UPS that gives you 3 things. So I have, and I don't know what UPS you've bought, so apologies for that. I have 3 UPSs. I have one down there, okay, which is what is this Oasis is connected to, and I have 2 in the studios, and effectively the 2 in the studios run half the studio each, okay. And the only reason I could run the whole studio on one UPS, on one of the UPSs I bought, and the only reason I haven't run the whole thing on one UPS is to give me a little bit of redundancy and a little bit more runtime. So a UPS, for those who don't know what a UPS is, UPS stands for Uninterruptible Power Supply, and effectively what it is, it's a little box, and I would unplug mine, but I'm not going to go down and unplug it because it's an utter pain to put back in. But they're a little box, and they contain some batteries, and you plug the mains power in one side and you plug your equipment in the other side. Okay, so that's effectively what it is. And while in normal operation, the UPS will charge those batteries so that when the power is lost, those batteries take over and will supply power to your equipment for a period of time. And basically, the bigger the UPS, the longer the runtime, okay? But all UPSs tend to have 3 distinct features, and the type of UPS you buy determines whether you get these and get additional features or not. So, I mean, some UPSs you can plug into USB ports and you can monitor them real time, others you don't need to. So, for argument's sake, I don't need to monitor my UPSs in real time. I have no, most of the time they sit there sort of switched on, but none of the equipment is on, so they just sit there charging away in the background. But if you're running equipment, if you're running stuff real time, you need it on all the time, then you might want to monitor that. You might want to know that the batteries are now kicked in, you've got problems with the power supply, all this sort of stuff. Okay, so they do lots of things. The more you pay, the bigger the box, the more features you get. But in general, UPSs have 3 core features. The first is they provide the batteries. Okay, so those batteries will kick in and run the equipment, the load, on the other side of the UPS. So if the power fails, the equipment will run on for a period of time until either the power is restored or you've had a chance to shut it down. Okay, and one of the reasons why I have the batteries there is to be able to shut down. So this thing behind me, this Oasis, the Kronos, the Jupiter, and some of the other bits of equipment, the Akai I've got, and samplers, they all run from software. And if you're in the middle of doing something, really what you want to be able to do is just shut them down properly. Let them shut themselves down, rather than all of a sudden just cutting the power and the thing crashes. Okay, that's not a great idea, especially if you've got hard drives in the mix, and older hard drives are very, very dangerous things because they have a habit of sort of crashing the heads if they all of a sudden abruptly lose power. So it gives you time to shut stuff down. Secondly, as I said, they provide uninterrupted power. which means that even in the event of a loss of power supply, the power to the equipment doesn't change. So you've got power to run the equipment post loss of supply, but you also have an uninterruptible power supply. And what that means is it will maintain the voltage of the region you're in to the equipment that you're running. Okay, I'm trying to do this really, really simply because I work in the energy industry, but once you start talking about batteries and uninterrupted power supplies, you then start talking about some very interesting concepts, which is completely irrelevant for this conversation. And thirdly, and this is the bit that the Thomann does, okay, they condition the power. What do I mean by conditioning the power? Well, power typically in the Western world, and most of the world actually, is delivered to your home in a format called alternating current, which basically means that the current is doing a sine wave. It goes from positive to negative to positive to negative, okay? And the voltage is the peaks between the positive and the negative, okay? That's how voltage is worked out, and it's the average peak, okay? It's not the top of the loop, it's the average, worked out with some mathematics. Anyway, that is how things happen, whether the voltage be 110 volts or whether the voltage be 220, 240 volts, which is sort of Western world, etc. It still works, or European, that sort of stuff. It still works in this alternating current format. And what can happen is things nearby can affect that nice sine wave. So in an ideal world, that sine wave is nice and smooth, and energy sort of does that. However, if you've got down the road, for argument's sake, somebody using a welder, and let's face it, you know, people in your neighbourhood may be using a welder, that can put a spike onto the supply, because all of a sudden that welder is drawing a lot of power for very short periods of time. And because it's drawing that sort of power, it might put a spike on, or there might be a motor that's running on a supply somewhere in the house, like I don't know, a washing machine or something, so an older washing machine, and that motor may be running what we call dirty, and effectively it's not properly shielding itself from the input voltage, and it's having a feedback onto the voltage, or it could put feedback onto the neutral. There's a whole raft of stuff that could be going on here, right? Okay? So what a conditioner does is a conditioner makes sure that sine wave is nice and smooth. Okay, if there are spikes, it will smooth those spikes out. Typically, it will have some sort of capacitance scenario going on. Okay, and it will draw from the capacitors, or it pushes power to the capacitors to smooth that sine wave out. Or, in the case of a UPS, it uses the batteries to do that. So it actually uses the batteries to actually do the smoothing process. So the batteries act as the capacitors. But either way, that's what it's doing when it's conditioning it. And it also protects you against what we term brownouts as well. And a brownout is where you think you're getting 240 volts in the UK, for argument's sake, but for some reason the energy company is only delivering, say, 210 volts. Okay, and that for some equipment is a problem because it's so finely tuned. So what the power conditioner will do is, in those scenarios, it will push power from the capacitors it's got to try and uplift that voltage as close to the 240 it can get. Now, a power conditioner like a Furman, will have limited ability to maintain that, whereas a UPS will have a lot more ability to maintain it because it can call from the batteries. Okay, but they are the predominant three things here that you're looking for in a UPS. If you then put a Thomann in sequence again, what you're effectively doing is you're making the UPS condition the power, and then you're passing it to the Thomann, which is actually pulling and pushing as well. And the two will, you know, when you're doing this, how do I explain this? The sine wave gets slightly out of phase. So instead of doing that nice and smoothly, what happens is that does that, it does that. And that's because it's processing the power as it goes through. I mean, my example is way out, but I'm talking about minute shifts, which means that they're out of sequence slightly. And that can cause you a problem, okay? And that could, you know, overload the UPS or overload the Thomann, because they're trying to work against each other slightly. So what I would say to you is, if you are on the road and you do not have a UPS, then a power conditioner like a Thomann is an utterly grand idea to have in your rig somewhere, and probably more than one of them. You know, you probably need one to manage each rack of equipment, not one per installation. So if you're out on the road with 4 racks of equipment, then you probably need 4 conditioners to run, one to run each rack. And then just obviously straight off to the mains from the back of the rack. That will probably be a much better environment. Or you have one to run your keyboards and one to run your Mac, whatever it happens to be. But they are a grand idea. If you can afford it, and you can afford to lug them around, because let's face it, batteries are made of battery material and they tend to be quite heavy. So if you can lug them around, have a UPS. A UPS is a far better option. And it also means that if you're working with a modern day keyboard that is computer controlled, like the thing behind me, then if the venue loses power, you are going to be able to take your keyboard down slowly. You are going to be able to properly switch it off, rather than mid doing whatever you're doing, all of a sudden it loses power and something else happens. So that's my advice. One or the other, but not both. Okay, the next one is from Joseph Dixon, and it says, have a Korg OASYS 88 keyboard. At the time of purchase, Korg told me it was the future generation. Well, it actually did lay the seeds. Unfortunately, I think for people who bought the OASYS, there weren't an awful lot of people who jumped on the bandwagon, and I think that was predominantly the problem. It was so far ahead compared with its competitors at the time. Not a lot of people really understood what this thing could actually do. So, but congratulations, this thing is fab. Told me it was the future generation keyboard instrument, upgradable in the future generation Korg instrument. I'm requesting the upgrades from Korg OASYS keyboard. May I have the upgraded from the latest Korg Kronos for my Korg OASYS keyboard workstation architecture keyboard? Please send me upgrade CDs. Right, okay, so the first thing is, and this was in response to a Sunday morning rant in July 8, 2018, talking about the OASYS update. So when I bought this thing, it was a base operating system software, and I've now got it up to the last released version of the OS and all the engines installed on it. And there are a whole bunch of videos where, and the link is below in the comments, so go and have a look if you want any information on this. Now, I am not going to give you the CDs for this, and the reason I'm not going to do that is because you have to generate a key from your keyboard in order to install the later CDs. Okay, so you really need to do that yourself. You have to register with the Korg user.net site to be able to generate the key, and you have to upgrade to 1.3.0 before you can generate that key, because on the base operating system it doesn't generate the key for you. Okay, so there's a series of steps you have to go through to be able to generate the key to be able to upgrade. So I'm sorry, I'm not able to send you the CDs because like pound to a penny, they probably wouldn't work for you. The best thing for you to do, if I'm honest, is do what I did, which is ring Korg support up. So I ran Korg support in the UK. They were incredibly efficient. I had the CDs in about 2 weeks. They burnt them down for me and sent them across, which was fab. Okay, so they might even send you them as ISOs. They tried to send them to me as ISOs, and for whatever reason I could never download the ISOs correctly, but they did burn them to CD and send them across. So your best bet is to go to the Korg Service Centre wherever you are. Minnesota, so you're US, so you have to go to the Korg Service Centre in the US somewhere. Okay, I'm not going to be publishing my response to you, Joseph, so the only place you're going to get it is here, and the reason I'm not publishing my response is because in your question to me, you've put all your personal details, okay? And if I publish the response, I would break the law in the UK, okay? So I'm sorry, I can't publish this. If you want to edit out your personal contact details, because I can't edit your details out of the question, I can only delete it, then I will publish the response. Okay, so there I am. The other thing is, and I didn't put it, is the fact that you can't upgrade to the Kronos OS, because the Kronos internal architecture, although built on the same idea as the OASYS, is different. Okay, so the software kernel that the Kronos works on will not work. Well, I'm assuming it will not work. I've not tried it, but I'm assuming it will not work on the OASYS. The OASYS needs to be upgraded with OASYS. So the first thing I would do with an OASYS, if you've never upgraded anything, is put some more RAM in it. RAM's readily available. It cost me 10 quid to buy RAM. It wasn't expensive. And the other thing is a plea to somebody out there to take over the Korg OASYS kernel code and think about whether it can be upgraded, because I'm sure that somebody who understands Linux and understands the music board inside this could actually support this and upgrade the code to a more functional code. And when I say more functional, I mean this thing has USB ports and it also has network ports on the back of it, but you can't use any of them because they're not enabled. Now it would be fab to be able to enable these features so that you could actually talk directly from here to other pieces of equipment, but they aren't enabled at the moment. The other thing you can do with this is, again, if you look at the back of this, is the touch screen that sits on top of here is effectively a separate plug-in. How do I? So there's effectively there's an output port on the back of the board, and they effectively just clone it to put the display up. So you know, it is possible that you can actually have this running with multiple displays as well. The board is perfectly capable of doing it. I've had a look at the board. I know what board it is. Can't tell you at the top of my head because it's written down in a note somewhere, but when I went and looked it up, the board can manage multiple monitors. It's the way that the software has been implemented that can't manage multiple monitors. So it would be great if somebody actually said, well, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the OASYS and I'm going to actually make that into a different type of music operating system. Anyway, I hope that, Joseph, has answered your question. Now the next one is a really interesting question, and it's from WV 591, and he goes, those cartridge batteries last less than the synth batteries itself. I know I have more than half a dozen dead cartridges, including three RAM 4s. This is talking about a piece I did about the Yamaha DX7 and the restore cartridge in January 2016. Good God. I have to be honest, and what we're talking about actually is these. So I went and I was in the studio Friday night briefly to pick some stuff up, and what we're talking about is these, and I sort of picked these up. So this is the original DX7 ROM. So it's a much smaller thing. This seems to work fine. This is a ROM cartridge. Okay, there is no battery in a ROM cartridge. I just bought it from a size perspective. Okay, and then on top of that you have a RAM cartridge. Now this is a RAM cartridge. Okay, and I thought that this was solid state. I have to be honest. This is me sort of starting to learn things rather than anybody else. But I thought this didn't have a battery in it. However, when I went and looked on the internet the other day, so even I learn things about these when people tell me stuff. There's a picture of the circuit board for one of these things, and as you can squarely see, it has the Yamaha soldered battery on it. Now, I have to be honest and say, I've been fairly lucky with my RAM 3s and RAM 4s in that they all seem to still work. And what I can't see is I can't see an easy way of getting into them to try and get to the battery if the battery ceases. I've just dropped it on the floor. That's probably done the world of good. Because it all seems to be very tightly glued together. So you've taught me something, so thank you very much. But I'm not surprised that the batteries are starting to fail, given the fact that these things are now 30 odd years old. So maybe I'll do a bit more research and work out how to get into the cartridge itself. I don't really want to go breaking these things, because, you know, they are what they are, and as soon as you start breaking them, then you've got to sort of somehow get them back together, and that just sort of seems like a real pain in the bum. And the last one for this piece, this section, from Parasaline. Again, I'm useless with names, so I apologise. Hi, thanks for your video. I've been looking for the parts list for a 2-level keyboard Gibraltar stand where I can place 88 key instrument on both levels. Can you send me the list that I can order? Well, actually, I can do better than that, because this comes from sort of a best practice keyboards video. But actually, if you do some searching for another video, and I have responded to you directly anyway, but if you do some searching for another video, which is the Sunday Morning Rant DX7 Mark II LCD Studio MIDI and racking, dated January 2017, the full parts list is actually in that video, in the comments below that video, and I will also put a link to that against this video. Okay, so this is the point in the video where I turn around to you, my viewer, and say, if you enjoyed the content of this video, please give it a thumbs up. The way the Google and YouTube analytic engines work is that the more likes you get against a video, the more it gets promoted by YouTube and Google, and therefore more people with the similar interests to what you have and I have get to see this content. This channel is driven by my love of music technology. That's what it's called, the Music Tech Guy for. If you've got queries, want to ask questions about themes or issues I raise on this channel, please, please, please do put your comments into the comment section below the video, and I will try to address whatever issue it is you've raised or whatever question you've raised. If it's something to do with me making future videos in terms of how to do something on a particular piece of equipment I possess, please feel free to say that as well. I can't promise to make videos on all the requests I get, but I do have a jolly good go at making most of them. Around about here is the subscribe button. Again, to do with the YouTube and Google analytic process, the more subscribers the channel gets, the more the channel gets promoted, and the more people get to see the content that you have obviously just watched. If you want to see my latest video, it will be in one of these two boxes on this side of the screen. Also, there is a second box there, and that video will be chosen for you by YouTube based on your YouTube preferences. I look forward to the next time that we interact, and I do mean interact, because I always enjoy reading your comments back to me. But for now, bye bye.